Good morning, everybody. Texas Educator Preparation Programs. Very excited to have this training this morning. This is a state-specific training supporting Texas Educator Preparation Programs in completing their annual Title II reporting. So this session is actually going to be led by Carrie Murphy, who will be able to talk us through a bunch of different pieces and share with us tips and tricks. This is Mark Olafson with the Texas Education Agency. I will be on the line, able to, as if we have additional state-specific questions, I'll be able to take those and circle back if necessary, or if possible, be able to answer at the end. With that, I will go ahead and hand it over to Carrie to share with us this morning.
All right, well, thank you. And I'm just going to turn my video on so you guys can see me just for the first few minutes. So hello, my name is Carrie Murphy. I am the project director of the Title II Data Collection and Support Center here at WestAT. And I want to start off by letting you know I have a presentation prepared, but this is for you. So I'm not sure, Mark, what the best mechanism is if folks want to jump in with questions. Is there chat? Are they able to unmute? Or what's the?
I think best option here will be, I think folks there should be a questions tab rather than just a chat tab. Okay. If you have questions that you still have at the end, I know Carrie's going to be covering a bunch of stuff. So I would encourage you to listen and learn around that. But if you still have questions towards the end, that question space is great for you to be able to type into. And we did already get a question, will this training be available? I'm gonna let Carrie handle that, and I also am just gonna note that today's training is being recorded as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, most of, I think everything that's not Texas specific anyway, that I'm covering today is available in trainings, and I can show you where on the website you can access those. For the Texas specific things, it sounds like if you are recording, Mark, I'm certainly happy if you are able to kind of share that out with folks, the recording afterwards. So I have no problems there. So Mark, you had kind of instructed folks to save questions until the end, and I just want to let you know I am perfectly comfortable getting interrupted, and I'm going to be going through section by section. So sometimes it's easier to ask questions when we're in that section anyway. So I'm not sure if I can see question. I don't think I saw that question come in. So Mark, if you can help, jump in if there are questions coming in and I should slow down in a particular section, I would appreciate that.
Happy to.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I'm going to start off with just a little bit of kind of intro and background to Title II reporting. Maybe some of you have been doing this for several years. Maybe this is your first time doing it. But this can be kind of a nice intro or refresher, and then we'll get right into the IPRC and spend most of our time there. So quick intro and background. Title II has been around for a couple decades now. It dates back to the 1998 reauthorization of the Higher Education Act. And that 1998 reauthorization included Title II, which called for accountability for states and for institutions of higher education, specifically in regards to their role in preparing and certifying new K-12 teachers. Title II in that 1998 reauthorization required that states report data annually to the U.S. Department of Education, including data on the certification structure and certification requirements for new teachers in their state, the pass rates of individuals on the assessments that were required for an initial teaching credential, the number of individuals the state certified each year, any alternative routes to a teaching license that the state offered. So that 1998 reauthorization was the beginning of the Title II state report card data collection. The Higher Education Act was then reauthorized again in 2008. And that's the most recent reauthorization of the Higher Education Act. So that's, of course, the version under which we currently operate. And the 2008 reauthorization added a requirement that institutions of higher education that offer teacher preparation programs submit reports annually to the state and the public. So it was that 2008 reauthorization that was the beginning of the IPRC, or the Institution and Program Report Card. So that's just kind of a quick crash course on the history of Title II reporting. But of course, our main goal here today is to walk through the IPRC, make sure you feel comfortable with the system features and with each section, with the definitions, that you understand what is required on each page, and what you need to do in order to complete your report, resolve any errors, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And if you could confirm you're seeing the website.
Yep, we are.
Perfect. Okay. So I'll go ahead and log in. And as I'm logging in, I do want to briefly mention, of course, there's the multi-factor authentication, which for some folks is kind of that first hiccup. The department does require this as a security feature. You have two options for your multi-factor. You can either download a free app like Google Authenticator or Duo, and you can use the app to retrieve your verification code, which is what I'm doing right now. The other option, though, is right under the login button, there's a having trouble, click here to request a code via email. So if you, for whatever reason, don't want to, download an app on your phone and you don't already have an authenticator app, you can request that via email. And the thing to remember there is it expires after 5 minutes. So you want to make sure that you're, checking your email right away and entering it right away, so you don't get frustrated by the code expiring before you've been able to put it in. Okay, so once you log in, you come to your dashboard. Your dashboard provides you with status boxes for each report that you are responsible for completing. And those kind of give you a quick at-a-glance view of your progress on the report and how many more days until it is due. As you scroll down on your dashboard, you will also see your account information. You can click there to edit or review your username, your password, your security questions, your contact information. And the last item on your dashboard is a send mail feature. And you can use this feature to send us an email at the Title II Support Center, to send an email to Mark by selecting, it'll say Texas here, the Texas Title II State Coordinator, or to both of us if you're not sure who to direct a question to. So that's just the quick scan of the dashboard. Let's go ahead and get into a report. So on the report homepage, there's a banner towards the top that tells me the name of the teacher preparation provider, the program type, the academic year for the report I currently have open. This banner is particularly helpful if you are someone who is completing more than one report. So if you have both a traditional and an alternative, you do want to always make sure you know which report you're in, right, as you're filling it out. You don't want to put your traditional information in your alternative report or vice versa. So that banner can be helpful in that regard. To the right of the banner, you have another status box that will continuously update as you start to save pages as complete. And then, of course, down the right side, we have the report menu to navigate through the pages of the report. And as you look at the sections, those sections are expandable. Some sections have multiple pages. And the pages and sections of the report also have color-coded indicators. So those all start out as red. And as you save pages of your report as complete, those red dots turn green. So then it kind of becomes a nice at-a-glance visual of which pages still need your attention.
Gary, real quick, this is Mark. Just we had a quick question.
Mhm.
As far as getting to the actual login screen from the very front screen, was it clicking on the Submit Reports button at the very top?
It was, yeah. So it actually looks different right now since I'm already in the report. But if you're on the home page and seeing the map, right, up here in the top, where right now we're seeing my account, technical assistance, and logout, those are going to be different options. And one of them is submit report. And that brings you right to the login screen.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's go ahead and jump into section 1. So there are, as you can see, several pages within section 1. It's kind of the biggest section of the report. The first one is the list of programs page. So on this page, it asks you to list each program that you offer that can lead to an initial teaching credential. And I want to stress initial, and I also want to stress teaching in the initial teaching credential. So if folks are, or if you have programs that are really designed for individuals who already hold a teaching license and it's an endorsement add-on kind of program, that's not reported through Title II. We're just looking for those initial teaching credentials. And then the teaching part of it as well. Title II is not interested in principals or admins, and any non-teaching roles are not included here. And that can vary a little bit by state. Counselors and library, different states have different kind of categories on whether or not, some of those types of roles are considered teaching staff or not. So Mark, I don't know if there's anything you'd want to add here in terms of what to include, what and what not, but the main message is that you should be focusing on teachers.
Yep, so our guidance to our preparation programs as far as like what programs and certificates count here is for those teacher classes. So we don't include librarians, principals, other professional class certificates in your reporting. So this is just for teaching certificates. And we also, in general, do not include supplemental certificates within what gets reported here, since those require a base certificate in order to be used by educators. So really teaching and focusing on those initial teaching certificates.
Perfect. Okay, so your list of programs is going to be preloaded for you. We kind of switched to this new structure last year where rather than you typing in each program that you have, there are now preset categories, which also means when there are preset categories that are used consistently across states and across teacher preparation providers, of course, it's going to lose some of the nuance, right? So that's expected and understood. What it means is if you have a program like let's say an elementary special education program, that might be a single program, but that would be reflected in 2 different rows in the table because there isn't an elementary special education option. There is a special education option, and then there will always be this extra row in case you need to add programs. So I can see the whole drop down there. And you can see there is an elementary education option. So I would choose both of those to reflect that I have a program that prepares elementary teachers, and I have a program that prepares special education teachers. And again, it is understood that some of the nuance and specificity is lost by having these preset categories, but it does then provide kind of more value in being able to analyze the data across the country this way. So along those same lines, knowing that a single program could actually be represented in 2 different rows, I want to talk about the last thing underneath the table. There's the total number of teacher preparation programs. So that is not an auto-calculated number because it can't be based on the example I just gave, right? There could be a single program that's represented in 2 rows. but that should just count as one program if it is indeed one program within your institution. So here we don't expect the number to align with the number of rows in your table. We want to know the accurate count of teacher preparation programs for an initial teaching credential. The other part I didn't mention is, of course, you're also going to mark whether each program is offered at the undergraduate level, that's the UG, postgraduate level, or both.
And so real quick on that one, because this is a fun fact about Texas, is that I know that Title II reporting has kind of two categories, as you just outlined, sort of that undergrad and that postgrad. But now, is this the same or different to where we report traditional versus alternative?
Yeah, that's a really great and a really important question. So thank you for that. So the traditional and alternative separation is done by the fact that they are actually two different reports. So if I go back to my dashboard, even up here, I can see that I have access to two different reports. Right now, I'm in my alternative IHE-based report. So I have to put my blinders on, right, when I'm doing the entire report. I am only reporting my alternative programs in my alternative report.
Got it.
So even if the traditional program maybe offers a special education program at the undergraduate level, but I am not going to say that there's a special education program at the undergraduate level, because right now I'm in my alternative report. So if there's an undergrad that's traditional, that's going to go in the traditional report.
Great. So I'm going to repeat back what I think I heard and make sure that I've got it.
Great.
So if I'm in my alternative program here in Texas, all these would be PG, because all of our alt-cert programs require candidates to have a bachelor's degree. So if I'm reporting in my alternative certification report for my alt-cert program, they would all be PG because they're all postgraduate. If I was reporting my traditional program and I prepare undergraduates, but I also have a degree-seeking postgraduate program, what we in Texas generally call post-bac, I would also report that there. So again, there's two layers here for us in Texas. The first layer is, am I in my traditional report or am I in my alternative report? If I'm in my traditional report, I want to report about all of my degree-seeking routes, which may be just undergrad, but maybe undergrad and post-bac, which I could do here using my UG and PG. But then if I'm reporting on my alt-cert program, which is my non-degree seeking program, which is and we just call it alt-cert here, I would, when I'm completing my alt-cert report, I would be choosing post-grad here. Hope that all makes sense.
It all makes sense to me. Of course, I don't need to submit a report, but yeah, that all sounds, exactly right. All right. Mark, do we have any other questions on this page, or should I go ahead and move on?
It's really right now, the questions were kind of those finer points about alt-cert versus traditional, and then post-UG versus PG. And just the last question here from Lydia, to clarify, for non-IHE alt-cert programs, so if you're a non-IHE alt-cert program, you're only going to have an alt-cert report to complete. Would we report as PG? Yes, you would report as PG because your candidates already have bachelor's degrees. So that's how we would clarify that. And I will also follow up with answers in the question and answer.
Great. Yeah, and what you just said, Mark, is exactly kind of the definition, because postgraduate it isn't as intuitive, right? As it's called different things in different places. So, post-bac, what have you. So for Title II, postgraduate really does, it's intended to indicate that folks would come into the program with an undergraduate degree already. So that's all exactly right there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move on, and the undergrad versus postgrad comes into play in this section as well. So the next section is this program requirements page. There are 3 subsections within this page: undergrad requirements, postgrad requirements, and supervised clinical experience. So we'll start with undergrad requirements. And so the first question is going to be important. Again, kind of keeping in mind traditional versus alt certs. So it's just asking, are there initial teacher certification programs at the undergraduate level? So it's sounding to me like alt certs in Texas should be answering no to that. You're not going to have undergraduate programs. So you're going to check no. It should be preloaded for you already based on what you've reported last year, but you'll want to double check. Should be no, leave the entire table blank, and go, right to postgraduate. Mark, were you going to say something?
Just that that's correct. And if you put a no there, then you don't end up in a situation where some of our preparation programs end up where they leave a yes there and then they put a bunch of requirements. And then when we are doing reviews, we have to go back and say alternative certification programs don't have undergraduate programs, so you don't have requirements there. And so we have to take them all back. So if you leave that blank when you're doing your alt cert report and you say, no, we don't have an undergrad, not only is it going to reduce the number of buttons you need to click here, but it's also going to make that that review process a lot easier. So just making sure that you go ahead and make sure for your alt cert program that you do that right.
And a great little tip to know, these are radio buttons, so you can't, like, once you've checked it, you can't uncheck it, right? But if you go right above the table, you'll see an if no, leave the table below blank, or clear responses already entered. So if you, accidentally have filled out the table and then said, darn it, that was for undergrad, I meant to do this all in postgrad, you can clear everything just by clicking that. And so now I can see everything is cleared. So that's kind of the quick way to be able to do that. And you do have to answer this first question or you're going to get an error message. The system is going to say you haven't completed this page yet, so you need to answer either yes or no. But again, that should all be preloaded for you, and so it's just kind of reviewing to make sure that that all looks correct. If any of your entry or exit requirements have changed, you'll want to update those. So moving on to supervised clinical experience. This is another section that kind of has some preloaded data, but there's also some data entry portions here. So what's going to be preloaded for you is the requirements here. So the first question is, are there programs with student teaching models? That should already be checked with either a yes or a no. And if you have programs with student teaching models, then you will have data already entered in here as well from what you entered last year that reflect the number of hours required prior to and for student teaching. And then the next chunk of questions is for programs in which candidates are the teacher of record at some point during the program. You check yes or no again if you have that type of program, and for both, if the answer is no, you leave the table blank. If you have programs in which candidates are the teacher of record in a classroom, then again, it's similar questions. So what are the number of clock hours required of supervised clinical experience required prior to that individual teaching as the teacher of record? And then how many years do they teach as the teacher of record during your program? And then for all programs, whether you have a student teaching model or folks who are the teacher of record in your program, everyone answers these questions. So these are just kind of the number of participants. And we have a few different categories. There's full-time equivalent faculty supervising clinical experience, adjunct faculty supervising clinical experience, cooperating teachers / K through 12 staff supervising clinical experience, and then the number of students in supervised clinical experience during the year. And by students, we do not mean K through 12 students, to be clear. We mean the students who are in your program, so the teaching candidates, right? All of those terms, full-time equivalent faculty, faculty supervising clinical experience, adjunct faculty, cooperating teachers, those are all defined in the glossary. And on each page, if there are relevant key terms for the page you're on, those are going to be hot linked, right, kind of in that intro part of the page. So that'll take you to the glossary. It opens it up in a separate tab, so you don't have to worry about, you know, accidentally exiting the system. And you can find the definitions for all of those. Any questions popping up here, Mark?
We just have a couple, a few ones that I think that we could go through. So if folks need, all the way back to the front, if folks need logon support, is it best for them to reach out via email if they don't have an account or need to set up their authentication codes?
Yeah, so it's title2@westat.com. Email is the best way to contact us. And yes, we can definitely help if you're having issues with multi-factor authentication. Please do let us know. An example of something that's real easy for us to fix, but might not be abundantly clear to you. If you got like a new phone, you don't have like an obvious way to set that up, because once you scan the, what's it called, the QR code, which is there the very first time you log in, and download that to your phone, if you get a new phone, the QR code is not available to you anymore. We can reset that on our end, so that way with your new phone, you can get the app and set it all back up. If you're having other issues, we'll be able to figure those out as well. So any issues with MFA or login in general, yeah, please just shoot us an email.
Great. The next question is back to where EPPs were communicating their total number of programs. So back there on the list of programs, there's a question: if they have a program, for example, in Texas, you can get a certificate for English 4 through 8, and you can get a certificate for English 7 through 12. Would they report those as separate programs?
So this will not allow you to put the same row twice. So if you were to try to put two different, that would probably fall under teacher education, English language arts. I don't have an option to indicate what levels that's offered at. So I would only be able to enter that once. Let's see, there is, I guess this is maybe worth noting, there is like a junior high, intermediate, middle school education and teaching option as well. So I guess it could be appropriate, I suppose, to include that, because it's offered at those middle grade levels. So that's the only other thing I can think of in terms of, you know, how that might be represented by the categories that are there.
So I'm going to go ahead and say, for the purpose of this menu, there's not a grade level differentiation. And so for the purposes of this menu, would not count those as separate.
Okay.
All right. And then question from in the all programs section, what do non-IHEs note? I think this question might be if you're an alternative. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I suspect because faculty and adjunct faculty are not necessarily kind of as relevant, right? I do think that, let's see, I want to get to the definition, because I think adjunct faculty may be broad enough, actually. So it says the definition of adjunct faculty is, for the purposes of Title II reporting, is teacher preparation provider staff, whether teachers or other educational leaders, who are engaged with the teacher candidates during their supervised clinical experience in terms of spending time observing or supervising candidates or discussing the clinical experience with candidates or other teacher preparation program faculty. So that is kind of a broad enough definition that, it doesn't say IHE staff necessarily. It says teacher preparation provider staff. I think the faculty definition might be a little, this kind of talks more about employment by the IHE. But so I think for the non-IHE based folks, it's kind of a broad interpretation of adjunct faculty, but there's also kind of no other place to include teacher preparation provider staff, which is why the department defined it this way. They were trying to be inclusive of, well, how would the non-IHE based folks include their supervising staff, right? So that's kind of why it's a broader definition. Does that make sense? I feel like I rambled a bit and I'm not sure if it came through clearly.
I think the answer is that for alt cert programs, your staff is included in the broad definition of adjunct faculty supervising clinical experience.
Yep, that's a more succinct way to say it. There we go.
Well, but I'm glad that we went to the definition on it, so.
Yeah. All right, any other questions or should I move on?
So real quick, back to the, we talked about the 4.8, 7.12 piece, and we would report it all under just the subject area. Right. We've got the question, would we count it as separate for the total number of teacher preparation programs at the bottom, or is the purpose of that number at the bottom really just how many rows are in the table above?
It's not just the how many rows. So actually that's a great question because there's two different ways the number might not match. And it's if the first example I'd given, I think, was like if you have an elementary special education program where a single program is actually represented by multiple rows. But this is a great example because it's the opposite. It's two separate programs, differentiated by grade level, but it's only represented by one row in the table. So the total number of teacher preparation programs really is intended to capture the number of teacher preparation programs you offer. And so if you consider that a distinct program, right, the 4 through 8 is a separate program, and then kind of the secondary level is a separate program, then please do count that as two separate programs in your count.
Great, so the count does not necessarily need to equal that piece. Exactly. Great, I've got, and trying to keep up here, there's a question about intern candidates on intern certs. Candidates on intern certs who are completing, and I'll type this in the chat, but candidates in Texas who are on intern certs and who are working as interns are indeed teachers of record. And so they would be counted as such. That's different from our clinical teachers. If you've got a teacher who's completing a clinical teacher experience under a cooperating teacher, they are not teachers of record. And I think that's all from me right now. I'm going to try and catch up with some of these questions in the chat.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, I'll keep moving on then. And I do want to recognize we have 24 minutes left. I'm not worried that we've only gotten through like 2 pages because these are the ones, these are where people tend to have the questions and it's good to spend the time there. So if we don't make it to some of these later, mostly narrative kinds of questions, it's probably okay. I'd rather spend the time, here where there tend to be the most questions. So next we have enrollment and program completers. So on this page, you report the total number of individuals who were enrolled in your teacher preparation programs for an initial teaching credential in academic year 2019-20, as well as the subset of those who also completed the program within that academic year. And then for those same 2 categories, total enrolled and the subset of completers, it's the breakdown by gender and by race, ethnicity. I do want to point out that there are kind of system checks here. So if you say that you have 8 program completers, but as you know, your breakdown by gender does not add up to 8, let's just kind of walk through what happens. So that way, you know, if you get this error, you'll know what to do about it. So what I did is I made it so it only adds up to 7, right? So the system is saying the sum of the completers by gender does not equal total completers. So it's telling me what the problem is, and I either need to correct it or confirm. If there is some reason that the sum, or that the sum would not equal the total, you can say the data are correct and provide an explanation of here's why things are not adding up. But more likely, it's probably a typo or something along those lines, and you would just make the correction, save again, and that should clear away the error. So when I save, I can see the page has been saved. And so you'll always see once you save a little green box and possibly a little red box. So you'll always get the confirmation, even if there are errors, it saved what you entered. But right now it's telling me the outstanding things that I still need to do on this page. Since this is the only thing it's showing me, I know that it's actually all done and I just need to mark it as done. So again, like if I know that I've reviewed this, I'm very comfortable, I do not need to kind of come back and revisit this, I can go ahead and mark it as completed and save, and that'll turn the red dot to a green dot. So next time I log in, don't even have to come back to that page.
Very quick question on enrollment.
Mm-hmm.
Should we count candidates who withdrew during the year?
Great question. Let's go to our definition here, which I think might, okay. I believe so, and then you wouldn't the next year. Let's read through it together. So it's an individual who has been admitted, enrolled, and registered in a teacher preparation program and participated in the program during the academic year. So I said I believe so because I'm making the assumption actually that they did participate during a portion of the academic year, even though they then withdrew. So if they were enrolled for a portion of it, I think that they would count as an enrolled student, but then the following year, since they wouldn't have participated, they're gone now, they would not be included kind of going forward.
Yep, that sounds good to me. So if they were enrolled for a portion of the year, we would count them as enrolled, but we would make sure that if they withdrew, we would remove them so that next year they would not count as enrolled.
Right. And so similar, if they completed one semester and then transferred to a different college, same kind of scenario there, you would include them, but then moving forward, they would no longer be included in future years. All right. Okay, well, let's move on to teachers prepared, and of course we can jump back if we get more questions on enrolled. Teachers prepared is another one where, number one, there's differences, I think, probably for your traditional and alt cert, so I want to make sure we touch on this. So there's 2 different teachers prepared tables or subsections here. There's teachers prepared by subject area, and there's teachers prepared by academic major. Teachers prepared by subject area should be relevant for everyone. I guess the caveat is if you actually didn't have any program completers. So if you have folks enrolled, but no one actually completed your program in the academic year being reported, you would check this little box, and that basically tells the system the rest of the table is supposed to be blank. Now you still got to scroll down to the next table and indicate whatever you need to appropriately there as well, but you would leave the tables themselves blank. If you did have program completers though, regardless of whether you're traditional or alternative, you're going to be reporting your number of program completers by the subject area in which they are prepared to teach. You'll see that the categories here align with the program options that you had in your list of programs page. That doesn't mean that there has to be perfect alignment of your program completers. There's all kinds of unique situations where someone could have I don't know, a minor, or or they end up qualified and prepared to teach some other category that maybe you don't offer an explicit program in. But the categories do align, so that kind of makes it a little easier for you. And folks can be counted across multiple categories here as appropriate. So if someone is prepared to teach, mathematics and science, if you have any sort of kind of dual programs, it's perfectly fine. We don't expect the sum of this table to be meaningful, right? We don't expect the sum of this to match the number of program completers, because we know folks can be counted in more than one category. So teachers prepared by academic major. One question we get a lot is, what's the difference? And one of the key differences here is teachers prepared by academic major is only for degree programs. So there is a question that precedes the table: do participants earn a degree upon completion of the program? And you'll need to mark yes or no to that. And similar to if you don't have any program completers, if you don't offer degrees, then this is not relevant for you and you leave that table blank. You do, again, need to make sure you mark no, so the system knows that it's supposed to be blank. Otherwise, you're going to get an error that says you haven't completed it. But yeah, Mark, I don't know if you want to, lay that out more clearly in terms of who would be completing this table in Texas.
Absolutely. So if for your alternative certification program, and remember, for your alt cert, your non-degree seeking program, if you have that, you will be completing a report specifically for your alt cert program. If you also have a degree seeking program, an undergraduate or a post-bac program, you actually complete a different report for that one. So you may have 2 reports to complete. If you're reporting your alt cert program, then since we've specified that our alt cert program are for our non-degree seeking students, if this was your alt cert program report, you would put no here, because participants do not earn a degree at the completion of that program, kind of by definition. If you are in your traditional report, where you are reporting your degree seeking students, then you would put a yes here, because they do earn a degree by definition upon the completion of the program. I hope that clears that up. We do just have a quick question, and I think it's related to these academic majors here.
Mm-hmm.
So some of these start with teacher education, and then some of these don't say teacher education. So right. There's teacher education history, and then there's just history. Can you just briefly talk about the difference?
Absolutely. And this actually might be something that you can help clarify for Texas specifically. So in some states, teaching candidates actually earn a degree. They major in the content area, and education is a minor or something along those lines. And so that's where this would kind of come into play. If the candidates actually have their major in a content area that's kind of outside of the education department, right? They're actually getting they're actually a math major minoring in education, and that's going to prepare them for being a math teacher and their math certificate. That's where this would come into play. So they would mark that their academic major is math, for example. And so the teacher education, those are all going to be the majors that are through your education program. So Mark, I don't know, for Texas, does that, what does that look like in Texas?
So up until very recently, you didn't major in education, you majored in your content area. Okay. So you would just want, recently there is now the opportunity to have an education major, but I think that the crux of this answer is that if you are preparing students who are working towards a degree, and the degree that they are going, this is about the actual sort of degree that they're going to be getting, their major. So for those, I've got an undergraduate program, and I've got who are history majors, and they're also going to be getting their teaching certificate, but their degree is going to be in history, and their major is going to be history rather than teacher education history.
Perfect. Okay. Well, let's move on. And of course, Mark, you just call out if I need to come back to this page. Next one is fairly straightforward. It's the program assurances. This is another page, of course, that is preloaded for you based on your responses from your prior year's report. So you'll just want to kind of, review those, make sure everything is still accurate. If you have further things you want to add in terms of your institution's strategies in meeting the assurances, you may want to review and update that. Any questions about program assurances?
Oh, real quick, I got a question about that last piece.
Oh,
so,
sure.
Thank you, Liz. As I was saying it, I was like, but of course, for your post-bac teacher candidates, they likely are pursuing a major in teacher education. They might be pursuing a master's degree in curriculum and instruction. They may be pursuing a master's degree in just in teacher education. Not just, but in teacher education, but in they might be getting their MAT, that sort of thing. And so there you would want to pick the major that most closely aligns with that, if that's what their degree is going to be in. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that we got that one.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an important distinction there. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into section 2. Look at that, we finished section 1. This is great. And again, that kind of is like where the bulk of your of the stress, I feel like, goes into section 1. So we've covered all the really key sections where you have a lot of data entry or more, review that you'll need to update. Not to say the other sections aren't important, of course. So here we have section 2, annual goals. This is also another one where we tend to get a lot of questions, so I'm glad we're able to get to this one. So here, what you're doing is you're setting and reporting on quantifiable goals for increasing the number of prospective teachers trained in 4 teacher shortage areas: math, science, special education, and instruction of limited English proficient students. All 4 pages are set up in the exact same way, so we don't need to go through each 4. The only difference is the actual shortage area being reported. So each page has 3 different subsections. You report on the progress of your last year's goal. So did you meet it? Did you not meet it? How did that go? You review your current year's goal, and then you're going to look forward to next year and set a goal for the next year. So let's kind of walk through what that looks like. So portions, again, are going to be preloaded for you. Your goal should already be in there, right? You set this a couple years ago for last year's goal. So you're going to say whether or not you met the goal and describe your strategies that you use to achieve the goal, to improve the performance in meeting the goal, or lessons learned, any additional comments, explanations. That kind of covers that first portion. The second is reviewing your current year's goal. There's nothing to do there. It's just reminding you what you entered last year. And so it's, of course, preloaded with the goal that you set last year for the current academic year that you're in right now. And then the next and last portion of this annual goals page is setting the next year's goal as you look ahead to the next academic year. I do want to point out, and I believe it says, oh, yes, it does say up here. Okay, in this first sentence of the kind of intro to the page, it mentions each institution of higher education that conducts a traditional teacher preparation program or alternative route teacher preparation program and shall set the annual quantifiable goals. There's this portion in parentheses that I want to point out. It says, including programs that offer any ongoing professional development programs. And I want to point that out because it's kind of different from the rest of the Title II report, where you put on your Title II blinders and you're only thinking about your programs that lead to an initial teaching certificate, right? Here, though, it's saying that, they're also interested in PD programs that you might offer. And so those might be outside of your initial certification programs. So I just want to let you know that you have that flexibility to think about, the other things that your institution is doing outside of your initial certification programs in order to, to increase the number of teachers in some of the shortage areas. So you're welcome to talk about those, to include those in the goals that you're setting. All right, we're going to move on to a quick note about Section 3 program pass rates. If you've been in and clicked on this, you have seen a message like this. Section 3, of course, you've worked with your testing company. Your testing company is working right now to finalize the pass rates. They get the files directly to us, and then we upload them. That usually happens by mid-April, so it should be happening in the next week or two, really. And once those are uploaded, when you come into Section 3, you will see them, and then you will be able to, review, make sure it all looks good, and then save that page as complete.
So thank you for highlighting that those will indeed be reported, piped in, data that'll be piped in from our partners at Pearson there. We do have a couple of those partners on the line. I think that finalizing that data on the Pearson side of the house, that finished off a couple of weeks ago. And we appreciate, the work that our preparation programs did in order to make that happen. I know that it can sometimes be confusing. I have to do Title II reporting in all these different places.
Right.
So as a preparation program, you report your Title II enrollees and all of that information to the Pearson group that supports that, in order that all of that data can then be piped over here to the Westat side of the house and captured here. So there is reporting that happens with both of those different groups, and we support, we greatly appreciate your work to make sure it happens over there so that then it's brought right over here.
Perfect. All right.
Oh, and I do have another, I have a quick definitional question.
Yeah.
And it's about differentiating between junior high, intermediate, middle school, basically so that we can understand how to call out 4.8 versus 7.12. Is there guidance in definitions around that?
I don't believe there is. Let me get to, let's see.
And it's okay if there isn't, but
I'm pretty sure there's not. Yeah, no, there's just academic major. I will say, and some folks find this more confusing and some find it helpful. There are SIP codes attached to all of the different subject areas and academic majors. If that's something that is familiar to to folks, then that might be helpful. SIP codes are kind of just a way of categorizing that a lot of institutions are familiar with. But we found that not everyone is, and they're like, what does this mean? Are we locked into some, the SIP codes are just there to be helpful for you. So if that way of categorizing things is familiar to you and useful, that might be helpful. The SIP code definition, which is not, Title II specific by any means, but can be helpful perhaps in making that clarification. But I suspect it's kind of more, how that's interpreted in your state. Do you use terms like this in Texas, and are they linked to specific grade levels?
I think that in general, I think we would consider that is probably pointing towards our certificates that are scoped 4 through 8. Differentiating them from elementary education and from secondary or high school. So although there's not a formal definition, I think that if we were thinking about if you had say a post-bac program that was preparing teachers to be, core subjects 4 through 8, and that they were specializing in middle grades if they're specializing in middle grades, it seems like that would be a good academic major to report for them.
Got it. All right. Well, I know we're kind of running up on time here. I just want to really briefly touch on these last few sections. So there's section 4 is low performing. And here it's, it's preloaded for you just to indicate whether your program is currently approved or accredited. So you'll just want to kind of review that for accuracy. Use of technology is also preloaded with your responses to a number of yes/no questions. And then there's an open-ended response that you'll want to review, make sure that's still all accurate, up to date. And then there's a teacher training, which is also preloaded with your open-ended responses describing how your program prepares general education teachers to teach students with disabilities effectively, to participate as a member of an IEP team, and to effectively teach students who are limited English proficient. Then below those, there's the same questions for special education teachers. And so you first indicate whether or not you prepare special education teachers. If no, you don't respond to those. But if you do, then you respond to those same 3 questions for preparing special education teachers. So again, those are all preloaded for you, and that's something you'll want to review, make sure it all is still accurate and looks correct. And then the very last page is contextual information, which is just where you can provide some, further information to describe your program. If you're doing something really great that you want to share, it's kind of a place you can toot your own horn if you want to. But it's optional. This is not a required section. And then in the last minute or so, I just want to share the certification page too. The certification checklist on that page is your full to-do list. Every single individual item that would prevent you from certifying your report because it's not yet complete or something along those lines, it's going to show up. And so it might look really long at first, but as you save a page is complete, that's going to knock out like 20 of them right there. So that's helpful as you're working through and getting close to certifying, as you can kind of see just what are the remaining items that you need to complete. Once you have completed all of the items in your certification checklist, saved all of your pages as complete, it's this page where you will then see, instead of the certification checklist, this is where you will come and you'll be able to enter your name and title and check the box and actually certify. So I think, wow, I did it with maybe 30 seconds to spare. I think we got through all of the pages that I wanted to. Mark, are there any last questions that you want me to try and cover?
Carrie, I'm gonna, in the program requirements page, there are requirements for entry, admission, and requirements for completion, right?
Yep.
Would it ever be the case that there was that I would check yes for admission but no for completion?
Yes, I think so. So if you, for example, require an ACT or an SAT score for admission into your program, that's an admission. I mean, I think I kind of get where it's going in the sense of you can't complete unless you have gotten into the program in the first place. So sort of by default, it's a completion requirement too. But I think that's kind of not really what it's asking here. It's, that's required at this stage, but it's not also required. There's not, to complete the program, you need to have an SAT score of this, right? That was an admission requirement, but not really a completion requirement. So I think that, yes, there are cases. They should be kind of seen as two different points.
Can we confirm that the system doesn't generate an error if that is the case? And we don't have to do it right now. It might just be a follow-up, but I believe I may have observed in the past the system generating an error, flagging an error if an admission is selected yes, but the completion is selected as no.
I know one thing that will generate an error is, so one item is minimum GPA. If you have a minimum GPA for either admission or completion, it needs to align with the questions below the table, which is, you said you had a minimum GPA for admission or for completion. So what is that
Or-
minimum? If you put something here, but you've actually said, no, it's not required, the system is going to see that as an inconsistency. So I wonder, it's possible, Mark, that maybe that's the error that was popping up.
Yes.
It shouldn't be the other, what we were talking about though.
So thank you because I knew there was a thing about GPA because I've had to support some stuff around there. So just through, so thank you, Shannon, for calling out that you've done that as well. So though you can have a requirement for mission but not completion, but whatever you mark for those GPAs has to be reflected down below.
That's right. And so if you have something in the, question 2 or question 3, but you've marked no, it's going to be a problem, and vice versa. If you said yes, it's required, but you don't complete those, the system is gonna fuss at you. Well, any last questions?
Real quick, where was the piece about recommendation? We have a question if the recommendation includes certification by the supervisor and cooperating teacher for certification, but I just want to make sure that I understand.
This item, I'm sorry, can you say the question again? I don't know that I.
Yep. So, and I'm not sure. So it was a question that said, does recommendation include certification by the supervisor and cooperating teacher for certification? I think it's a question as to, is that what that means?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I think for admission, that's more typically like a letter of recommendation for the candidate, right? But on completion, I think, it certainly could, I think. It could be either, possibly. It could be some sort of letter of recommendation, although I think that would be less likely. It probably is more appropriate that it would be that recommendation for certification.
Yeah, and
for completion.
And thank you, Liz. Absolutely, definitely aware that both the supervisor and the cooperating teacher have to recommend for of the candidate for certification.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not familiar enough with this element within the IPRC to say that directly maps onto what we consider there. I think that it might be something that we could interpret that way, but definitely not for admission. Admission would be some sort of recommendation by former teacher, supervisor, peer, what have you.
And there is an additional text box that's kind of item 4 under the table that, if folks said yes to each of these, but they actually kind of mean those slightly different things, like it's a letter of recommendation upon admission and then the recommendation for certification upon completion, you could kind of provide that nuance in the text box.
Nice.
Well, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Mark, if there are further questions and you were to compile and send them to me, I'd be happy to either hop back on the phone with you or provide some written responses. Does that sound good? I don't want to leave any folks hanging.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I think we've been able to answer almost these pieces. And I want to also note that we are at time. We've got and I think we'll probably follow up with additional things about admission and completion. Again, it's the difference between to be admitted to your program versus being able to complete your program. Are there requirements? But we'll go ahead and follow up. And I wanted to thank you again, Carrie, in particular, for coming and joining us here in Texas, being able to talk through and field a bunch of these questions. And support us. And we look forward to everybody. I think we're on the clock for 1 month now to get all of these reports all the way completed and closed out. So really appreciative of everybody taking the time today, Carrie, joining us and walking us through all these pieces. And I think I'd wish everybody a really good rest of your day and a happy reporting season.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mark. Yes. Good luck, everyone, in this last stretch. And just let us know if you have any questions.
Thanks.
Okay, bye-bye.